Thanks, everybody. I'm Helen Scales. I'm a marine biologist and an author based in Cambridge, England. And I'm going to tell you about my new book, The Brilliant Abyss. It's a book about the deep ocean. And I wrote it for a couple of reasons, really. Firstly, because the deep ocean is the single biggest living space on our planet. Something like 90% of the available space for organisms to occupy is deep ocean, with an average depth of about 4 kilometers, covering about half of the surface of the Earth. It is a vast space, and it's full of incredible life. I should put this on properly, shouldn't I? Is that working better? There we go. Extraordinary creatures live in the deep ocean. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to write this, was to just show that we're in this, I think, a golden era of exploration and discovery about what lives in the ocean, in the deep, and how. And that question of how do organisms overcome the extreme challenges of life, where there's no light, there's very little food, the pressure is extraordinarily high, and there's various other interesting things that make things even more tricky down in the deep, which I'll come to. While I was writing the book, I had the opportunity to go on an expedition in the Gulf of Mexico. We were studying deep sea food webs in various different ways and connections between the land and the deep ocean. One thing we did, which no one had done before, was we put dead alligators in the abyss. We think alligators probably get into the abyss on their own without the help of scientists. They don't live down there. They live in coastal areas and in rivers and swamps. But after they die, there's a good chance that some of them get swept offshore, perhaps during storms. They end up in the deep ocean, and they provide important food. The deep ocean has very little of its own food. There's no photosynthesis. There's no new food being made over most of the ocean. So something like an alligator could provide important carbon and nutrients, and it did. So we put these guys down. They were humanely culled from a conservation program. We got permits for these guys, put them down in the abyss about 2,000 meters down. A day later, this is the photograph the image we saw, of giant isopods, these great giant pink things, the giant isopods. They're basically big pill bugs about this size. They're scavengers. They can eat once every 4 years. So an alligator or something else big comes along, and that's food for them for quite a while. But the really cool thing happened after a month. We went back and collected some of the stripped back bones of one of these alligators, and we found that they were colonized by bone-eating worms. We found 2 new species of bone-eating worms. The first ones to be found in the Gulf of Mexico, and these are really extraordinary creatures. One of the things that lives in the deep that shows just how evolution has driven solutions to the challenges of living in the deep. These guys have specialized their diets and their bodies, their entire physiology, to eating the bones of dead vertebrates that end up in the deep ocean. They were first discovered on dead whales in 2002, and since then lots more species have been found on various different bones that people have put down there, but these were the first from alligators, and 2 new species. So if you want to find new species, go look in the deep. It's just full of them. So I guess, yeah, the half of the book for me is really about showing this enormous space of the deep ocean. If we want to know our planet, we have to know the deep ocean, and such extraordinary things are being discovered down there. The other reason I wanted to write the book is because even though the deep ocean is so far out, so remote and so enormous, but it is not out of reach of human impacts. And so what I also looked at was some of the historical impacts in the deep ocean, things like dumping of chemical weapons, fishing is getting deeper over time, and also new threats to the ocean are coming up. And this species I put on the screen, the scaly-foot snail, kind of sums up actually the 2 sides of my book, the kind of the wonders and the biology of the deep, and also the threats. So these guys have shells made out of an iron-based compound. It's the only organism that's been discovered with a skeleton essentially made out of iron, and they have these very weird feet covered in scales. No other mollusks look like this. They live on hydrothermal vents, which are these extraordinary ecosystems only discovered 40 years ago. They're basically deep water hot springs, but like on steroids. They are not only ridiculously hot, hundreds of degrees Celsius, they're full of toxic compounds. Of course, we've got the huge pressure. They're several miles down beneath the surface. Not the kind of place you imagine life would thrive, but when they were first looked at, they were found to be utterly thriving with very strange life, and including this snail, which was found more recently in the Gulf, in the Indian Ocean. They're surviving because they have microbes living inside them which harness their energy from chemicals. They're chemosynthetic. It's a dark alternative to photosynthesis, something which we had no idea about. An ecosystem that's totally cut off from sunlight. So the problem with these guys is these microbes that not only produce food for the snails, but they produce the toxic sulfur byproduct. And scientists have figured out actually by seeing this, this is the nanostructure of their scaly feet, are made out of these tiny little tubes, which actually act like tailpipes. And that's how they survive this kind of poisoning from the inside. It draws the sulfur out of them away from these symbiotic bacteria which are feeding them, and that's how they survive. So they have this extraordinary adaptations for life on hydrothermal vents, but they are highly endangered. And they only live in 3 populations on 3 vents in the Indian Ocean. And 2 of them have permits for exploration for deep sea mining. You'll see a lot of talk about deep sea mining in the news at the moment. Some more is about to come out, so keep an eye on it. It's not happening yet, but people are looking at these vents and various other places in the deep sea to mine metals. And the scalyfoot snail has been listed as endangered due to these threats. So it's one to keep an eye on. If you'd like to know more, my book is coming out in the US in July, The Brilliant Abyss. And it's full of lots of more wonderful things about the deep ocean. Thank you very much.